You know, usually when I make a devlog that's more talking about concepts and less showing new stuff in game, it is because I ran into a block of some kind or didn't have time to make meaningful progress. But that is not the case this week. I had plenty of time and made plenty of progress, but it was all design. Design for the systems around the player avatar as a playable character. Which isn't something I initially intended to have, but as I've explained in the week 6 devlog, it was by far the best thing I could think of for Anna to offer to the player, where both accepting and rejecting the offer would be meaningful, which is the kind of choice that I'm striving to fill this ROM hack with. So the design of the avatar-related systems started with 3 days of trying to figure out what classes would be available for the player to choose from. Why did it take so long? Well, I'm struggling to find a good place to start the explanation from. Whatever I pick, going on a tangent halfway through to explain another part of the design seems inevitable. So let's just start with my plan for the avatar creation and go from there. If, when you had your first talk with Anna, you chose to answer that you do like avatars, the next time you talk with her, she'll offer you an opportunity to summon an avatar for you to use. Then you would pick a class, weapon ranks, base stats and growths, and finally, a portrait. And would you believe me if I told you that every step of that process was a big challenge to design in a way that I would be satisfied with? The worst one, by far, being the class and weapon selection. I will not go into details about this design process, because my notes from it are a complete mess, as trying over and over to find a solution that works was driving me slightly insane. Suffice to say, after spending half the week on this, I eventually arrived at a good enough solution. That being, the player has 3 base classes to choose from, and 3 special ones. The base ones being a Cavalier, a Troubadour and a Knight, available in both male and female versions, while the special ones are a Thief, a Supplier and a Wolf. From that description alone, it probably sounds very arbitrary, and like it wouldn't be that difficult to pick. Well, it was difficult, and even that selection that I eventually managed to figure out has a bunch of seemingly random changes from the vanilla classes. Even putting aside the weapon selection, which, because I wanted more customization, lets you get weapons normally unavailable on the classes, there is the fact that Avatar Cavalier promotes into a Paladin or a Ranger, not Paladin and Great Knight. There is a male Troubadour class called Deacon. The Avatar Knight promotes into General and Great Knight as normal, yes, but neither of these gives them a sword rank, which they normally do. The special classes don't get to choose their weapon ranks and can't promote normally, and the Avatar Thief doesn't get a sword rank either, being limited to exclusively knives. And these changes are not arbitrary either. I won't explain why, because at this point it's still far away in the future and also a spoiler for the one part of the story that I don't want to reveal ahead of time, but as a consequence of one of the choices you might be able to make, and keep that might in mind, I'll get back to it later, as a consequence of one of these choices, you might end up with a secret promotion. And as I mentioned in that week 6 devlog, one thing that the promotions of all these classes had to share is flight. And it is a forced promotion on a character that might have already been promoted before that moment. Meaning that this flying class needs to be able to accommodate all the weapons the character has ranks for. And that was a source of most of the issues. Free stuff is great. I can't exactly justify spending hundreds of dollars, if not more, to hire or commission someone to draw graphics for my project. And it's not my area of expertise, so I can't do much myself, small edits being the best I'm capable of. So I am eternally grateful to Clockinator, who created the communal Fire Emblem graphics repository, and to the dozens of artists who contributed to it. The fact that I can just say, I want Wyvern Lords in my ROM hack to use axes instead of swords, and then just open the repository and get the battle animations necessary for that change is amazing. But it can also be limiting, especially once you want something really specific. And this selection of avatar classes is a perfect example. You know why the Avatar Cavalier promotes into a Ranger instead of a Great Knight? Because there is no bow animation for a Great Knight. You know why the Avatar Knight doesn't get a sword rank on promotion? Because the flying class that they can promote into only has animations for lances, axes and spells. There is a set of animations for a male Troubadour equivalent called Deacon, and one for a Valkyrie equivalent called Templar, but the latter doesn't have a sword animation, which Troubadour, Deacon and Valkyrie all have, and which I intended to use. Although that issue I managed to figure out a way around, I will have a Templar class, but use forget the animations of a Dark Knight, recolored to be more fitting for a light magic using class. Oh, and often even if both male and female versions of a class exist in vanilla Fire Emblem, and both have expanded animation sets on the repository, one of them will have less animations than the other. You want a magic using Cavalier? Only the male one has the animation. A thief with a bow? That one also is male only. A sage with a knife is female only. And I could go on with these examples, but you get it. It becomes a limitation when you want to have an option to pick between male and female characters while having the same weapon ranks either way. And perhaps the most limiting one of all, the fact that there is a grand total of one flying class, that being the Harrier, and that this one class has no other weapons in common with the thief. So the avatar thief must be limited to using only the knives. There is a different Harrier animation set that does have swords, but doesn't have daggers, so maybe I could splice the two, but considering the fact that I've never edited a battle animation before, and this one in particular has 56 frames, each of which would have to be edited separately, I decided to leave it be for now. So as weird as it is to have avatar class options that let you pick almost every weapon combination you could ever want, next to one that gives you a single weapon type that isn't even a real weapon, it is what I have to go with if I want to have an avatar that can use knives, which I do want, because it's another chance for the player to get a knife user before the last third of the game, should they miss the soul recruitment. And yes, the supplier and the wolf, while I like the idea of having both of these as potential avatars, were added pretty much just for the sake of justifying the special category of avatar classes. And once I had the classes and weapons figured out, statistics became an issue to resolve. But looking at how long this script already is, and the fact that I'll still have to actually implement all the things I designed next week, I'll probably cover that in the next devlog. I would like to go to sleep at a reasonable hour for once. So I will see you next week if you are interested in a Murder Drones fan game that I'm also working on, or in 2 weeks if you just want to see the Divine Dream devlogs. Until then, farewell.